Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
Steve Green is the publisher and editor of the Maryland Coast Dispatch. Steve, always good to talk to you. Thanks for joining me here on Delmarva Today.
Thank you, Brian.
We've been talking, I feel like, for months about, certain issues that just catch fire a little bit in the local press, and this debate over the merits of a sports complex and the county being involved in the purchase and construction of a sports complex has been one of those stories I feel like you and I keep talking about. We thought it was dead after the election, and now it's kind of coming back around, and it seems like a story that won't die. Tell me how we are still talking about a sports complex at this point in Worcester County.
Yeah, right. So, remember what the newsroom's like. We were all last year when it was seemingly dead. We were all a little sad because it was a story that had so many legs, and it was so we were been writing about it for months deep. I think we had about 40 some stories in the calendar year 2022 on this topic. So lo and behold, town of Ocean City, who commissioned a study update with the Maryland Stadium Authority last year, has decided they want to at least revisit the sports complex discussion. Last week's decision was pretty vague. It wasn't like they're committing to it one way or the other. They just felt like they had spent $50,000 to update an existing sports complex study with the addition of the site located west of Stephen Decatur High School, as well as the addition of a 120,000 square foot indoor arena to it. So they wanted to get, they asked the state to update this study, kind of lay out the jobs, the economic impact. And when that study came back, the county commissioners, after an election, decided they were done with it. They didn't want anything to do with it, sports complex in general. And even the study, they didn't really even review the study or anything. So the town of Ocean City, at the time, the mayor was outspoken and said, this is a mistake. We should at least review the study. The county would have nothing to do with it. So now Ocean City is saying, we funded this study. We ought to at least take the due diligence and review it. And they're taking it a step further. There were some comments amongst the council members about, let's not do this at City Hall. Let's not have us up here on the dais and citizens down there and the report coming back. They wanted it to be more of like a roundtable discussion. So I believe they're going to invite the Worcester County commissioners. I don't think any of them, maybe one, the Ocean City representative, will attend. The commissioners are on the record saying we want nothing to do with this. But Joe Machesak, the former commission president who represents Ocean City, has been an avid supporter of it. But Ocean City also said they're going to invite citizens to come. They're going to invite the town of Berlin to come, which will certainly have an impact. This sports complex, at least at the site identified, would have an impact on the town of Berlin. And just have a free-ranging discussion about it. What it leads or where it leads, of course, is unknown. But look, the Ocean City said, we really want to know what the stadium authority meant when they said that, 2/3 of the cost might be picked up by the state and the rest would be local. So they want to take a deeper dive, essentially. And again, we don't know where it's going to lead, but it's coming back up for discussion. And that conversation and meeting is going to take place in March sometime.
Right. So I think the last time that you and I talked about this kerfuffle conundrum, expanding story, I think, we sort of looked back in hindsight on the way information was shared, the way that the conversation took place at a public level, at a private level. To recap, we sort of felt like, in looking at the facts of the matter, that the county kind of fumbled their lines a little bit. If they would have articulated information a little bit differently, maybe there wouldn't have been this upswell of opposition that led to a referendum, which eventually, got voted down. Do you feel like Ocean City coming in here, they maybe have some muscle based on their connection with the Maryland Stadium Authority and this process that they appear to be on the first steps doing differently than the county did? Does it make you a bit optimistic that maybe this will have a different outcome here?
I think it's very possible. Ocean City, has taken a little bit of a different approach, and that, right off the bat, they feel like they're teeing it up that let's see how much the state is willing to pay of this thing. and that's really, the county never got to that point. It really was not. We know, $153 million is what it's estimated to cost. I mean, that it's hard to even get past that, right? But if it's paid 2/3 by the state and a third by local, with grants, all these other things, all these different potential layers that could come out. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a different approach already. You can see it, that the willingness to have other parties at the table, residents, the town of Berlin, presumably to maybe some even fire and law enforcement, those sorts of people. It does seem like it's a little bit more of a consensus building operation. The whole concept, you think about this, the whole concept of the town of Ocean City buying property miles west to build a sports complex, to put heads in beds and rear ends in restaurant. I mean, it's really, I actually find it fascinating that, this government could be potentially exploring this. The one thing Ocean City did say, because a lot of the issues was the site has been a major concern of many people. Ocean City is not, they're not saying we have to do it at this site. They're saying maybe other sites are of interest. So it's showing a little bit more of that openness rather than like the tunnel vision that the county was accused of.
Now, what does this mean for all of those people who supported the referendum to get this thing shut down? I mean, they have to be thinking, what do we have to do as citizens to make our voices heard and to make elected officials not move forward with a project we don't want to support financially?
It's another fascinating point. I mean, what these, one of the major organizers of the petition was Vince Israel, who's a former longtime councilman in Ocean City, a resident of Ocean City. What's to stop him if Ocean City goes down this road and does decide, to pursue this route? What's to stop him from launching a petition in Ocean City to stop it? One thing I've learned in my 25 years being here, if Vince Israel has a petition, going to be successful, the petition, if the issue will get put on the ballot. Now, what happens at the ballot is another matter. He is not undefeated as far as having ballot issues go forward to prove the vote that the way he wants to go. So look, I think this could very well be petitioned by Ocean City or by an Ocean City group like it was at the county, because there is still this philosophical issue of, should public funds be spent on what people believe is a sports complex that will really only benefit the private sector?
Sure. Last thing on this topic, and then we'll move on. Does this move by Ocean City, from a political standpoint, does this sort of ruffle the feathers of anybody that are their compatriots and their, similar elected officials at the commissioner level? Does this drive a wedge between the Ocean City Council and the Worcester County Commission? Does it make them look bad?
Well, it's going to be a really interesting point. I mean, I think that we actually, now this is like a trade thing, but we had in the newspaper on the website, we had basically a minor error, and I heard from County Commission President Chip Bertino about it, and it was the story made it seem that the commissioners maybe left the door open a bit to pursuing a sports complex at some point again, and he made sure to let me know that door is completely slammed shut, and that as long as the current group of commissioners are in office, the county commissioners want nothing to do with a sports complex. So back to your question about, does it cause a divide? I mean, I think as long as county dollars aren't being used on it, they didn't say that they didn't support a sports complex being built in the county. They just didn't want any public dollars of the county, Worcester County, is being used on it. This, I guess, technically would come from Ocean City, who presumably would use some sort of room tax dollars or some sort of, Ocean City is such a larger government and they have such more flexibility with their funding.
That's a good point. Let's transition to something in Ocean City that has been a major point of contention between, the idea of developing a large project and people who live in the town that maybe don't like it. And that, of course, is this massive hotel project called Margaritaville, downtown between 12th and 16th Streets. Over the course of many years, those beachfront hotels and those lot property owners have sold to this developer. Now you've got a former Ocean City councilwoman leading a charge to try and get things stopped based on alleys and streets and easeways. It's an evolving story, and it seems to get more heated and complicated with every passing week. Where are we on that expanding story?
Sure, yeah, it is a bit complicated in that it involves a right of way along Baltimore Avenue. The town has a right of way on Baltimore Avenue that private enterprise has been using for decades. It's basically a paper thing. People use it for parking, use it for signage. The official granting of this right of way to the Margaritaville developers is what led to a petition effort that Margaret Pillis led, and it went on the ballot, and it was that ordinance was basically successfully voted down by the citizens. So what Ocean City has done now is they've decided to, it's essentially ignoring the petition results, and they've decided they're going to throw out that ordinance and come back with a new ordinance that basically grants this right away for the whole part of Baltimore Avenue that's slated to be redeveloped, including the part that was successfully petitioned to referendum. So it is a complicated matter, and I think people get lost in that. But specifically on the Margaritaville development, that is moving forward. And in fact, actually, the owners of the development company, there's two primary owners of the development company that bought the property. They recently died in a heli-skiing accident. I believe it was in Canada. And the lawyer for the local lawyer that's representing them for this project has made it clear that the project is moving forward despite this tragedy. So it's interesting that, but yeah, this is one of those projects. It's a sign of the times of what we're seeing in Ocean City with these. That was the Phillips family owned that property for generations. They had their beachfront hotel, then they had their seasonal housing in the back with an empty lot. It was used for bike renting and parking, of course. And this project appears to be moving forward at all, and it just does appear it's going to be a long-term thing. This right away is a key piece to their development puzzle, and that is going to be quite a while out before that ordinance gets passed. There are some people that are concerned about the whole right of way given away because the voters said they didn't want that, but I think the city council would say the voters said they didn't want that 12th to 13th Street being given to the developer for that project. But so the town is now saying, well, we're just going to go ahead and give this officially give this right away along the whole corridor. But of course, it includes that parcel. So it's just really a fascinating thing. And it does. Bottom line is the project appears to be moving forward at all costs or at all angles, but it's just going to be a matter of years before we see anything concrete move forward, it appears.
But as complicated as the nuances of this right of ways and property and streets, doesn't this really come down to a more philosophical debate between development and something new versus tradition and something smaller scale? I mean, Margaret Pillis, who's leading this charge, has, every quote that anytime I ever interviewed her, she wanted to keep the tradition of Ocean City being a small fishing village, and every decision she made, politically speaking, was trying to keep the town very small. This is probably one of the largest hotel projects that the town has ever seen, and really is a sea change moment at a time when, and we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, like there's a lot of things changing in Ocean City from the people that are running, hotels and restaurants. So there's a lot of change happening. Is this more of a sign of the times of people not liking the change that is seemingly inevitable?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of the times. It's just properties that have generationally been known as one thing, changing hands. Phillips family decided they really didn't want to be in Ocean City anymore. It's a corporate decision. They don't have any restaurants in town anymore. They've sold all their properties. This is example one that kind of hits at the heartstrings because Phillips family was synonymous with Ocean City for many years. And now what you're seeing here is something I think that's going to play out continuously over time. If you walk on a boardwalk today with, where the Santa Maria Motel was, just a little north of this parcel, is now a courtyard. Next door to one block north of that, where the Seascape Motel was, is a Hyatt place. It runs up and down the whole boardwalk. You're seeing these examples. And I think ultimately, all of these older hotels, like the Langford Hotel, recently changed hands. It only seems like a matter of time before the new property owners come up with their new plans, wait for the economics to be right, and demolish and rebuild. The thing about the Margaritaville, it's just this massive scope. I mean, we're talking 250 rooms, 3 hotels. It almost makes, and I know there's been some conspiracy theories that say what makes them think that Ocean City can support a hotel of that size year round. Some conspiracy theorists say, well, it's because gambling is going to come to Ocean City. You know, that what's going to support the convention center hall that potentially could be included in it.
Wow.
These are all just really fascinating things. And I think concerns are very valid. And it's, you know, not just the older generation, it's the younger generation too, that think of Ocean City as one way. It just appears that there is just changing tide.
Yeah. And you're listening to Delmarva today here on WESM 91.3 and WSDL 90.7. I'm your host, Bryan Russo, and we're speaking with Steve Green. He's the publisher and editor of the Maryland Coast Dispatch. Steve, I want to stay in Ocean City. We were alluding just a few minutes ago to all of the change that is happening in town, not just with development, but also just, you know, people's favorite restaurants. There's a lot of things that are changing. It was announced this week that Mackey's restaurant, the Mackey and Pam Stansel, the longtime proprietors of that Bayfront establishment, are stepping away, kind of taking, you know, sort of a retirement of sorts. And the very successful Sodell restaurant group in Delaware will be, you know, taking over there. There's some other changing restaurants. Talk to me a little bit about sort of the changing restaurant community that's happening.
Yeah, so these sorts of things happen every year in the off season. Changes occur. You know, redevelopment occurs. You know, one of the more recent, you mentioned Mackey's, of course, you know, that sold for somewhere north of around $16 million. I think the good news maybe for traditionalists is that there's no massive plans to change that property. You know, that is a parcel that's a rectangle. It comes off Coastal Highway. There's Chauncey Surf Shop in front. There's a wave water sport business there, and it goes all the way to the back where Mackey's is. There do not appear to be major changes in store for it now, but as we mentioned before, you know, this typically happens. You know, properties change hands, everything stays the same for a little bit, and then there could be some redevelopment, you know, opportunities in the future. I mean, Mackey's is a model that's very successful. It's could see Sodell Concepts, which I guess they're using this as a high water management group is coming in.
Right.
It's a division of them, I believe, maybe the Maryland division of Sodell Concepts. They, you know, are looking to probably upscale the food. My guess is a little bit just based on some of the advertising that they're doing as far as for chefs and things like that. You know, I imagine it might be a little bit more year round, or at least, you know, 6 to 8 months of the year based on early things are. But, you know, remember last year, BJ's on the Waters changed hands. You know, that was the same for a little bit, you know, year summer, I think. And then it is now underway with redevelopment. It's going to be called the Atlantic House at one time, but a brand new restaurant on the water, bigger, newer. You know, these are things that we're seeing. You know, there's some other businesses that are changing hands. It's you know, Full Moon Saloon in West Ocean City, Shotty's Point of Ocean City is expanding west and taking that over. It's a very popular restaurant in Ocean City, very small restaurant in Ocean City that will have a lot more room to grow over in West Ocean City, which is a booming area, as we know. Coastal Smokehouse on Route 50 has changed hands. That is Rope Walk people have bought that, so they're growing their wings over to West Ocean City. You know, Coastal Smokehouse, long story there as far as the involvement with the Canuck tragedy and a former shareholder's involvement in that potential crime. Even in Berlin locally, the Globe, which is owned by Bryan Brushmiller at Burley Oak, is leasing out the inside to a really popular spot in West Ocean City, brought up Barney's, that had this Asian cuisine. So they're looking to come over here and grow and do some things differently. So, you know, these are all exciting times.
Yeah.
Every year these things happen, but some of those bigger ones in Ocean City with Mackey's, that's you know, a pretty big change. You know, they were ready to retire, and here come a new corporation coming in and buying it.
How much of this do you think is, you know, just this natural attrition that happens in, you know, the restaurant industry historically, you know, even put aside, you know, hard economic times or, you know, post-COVID years, the restaurant industry always has a high bit of turnover. Do you see this as sort of a larger sea change moment for Ocean City, where the titans of the restaurant industry, like Pam and Mackie Stansel, might be, selling soon, and the landscape or the heavy hitters will change hands from people like the Stansels to the proprietors of Rope Walk, for instance, who are seemingly picking up properties each and every year.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm a little conflicted on this one, quite honestly. I feel like some cases, in the Stanzel's case, they have done this, been there, done this a long time. I think they were ready to change over. But also, it's, restaurant operators really are facing unique times, and the rising cost of everything. Labor, it costs a lot more to pay a dishwasher and now today than it did 10, 15 years ago. So I think it's some of the people that maybe are a little longer in the teeth are finally realizing, man, the profit's not the same as it used to be. It's harder to make it. And maybe they're seeing this as an opportunity to cash out. I think COVID in some ways, maybe all of us in many ways, it showed us it's an opportunity to internalize and kind of refocus. And I think in some of these cases, that's being seen. Sometimes less is more, simpler is better. I think these are some examples of that. Another one in Berlin here, where a Salisbury restaurant, Rody Joe's, took over a place called Crush and Crab in Berlin. That's another one where it was an operator who was struggling to make it, and then here's a new business coming in, and I've driven by it a couple of times. It's been pretty full. I think it's doing well. So it's this new energy, new life. Some people are realizing it's harder now, and I'm ready to move on.
Yeah. As we wrap up here, all of this change in restaurants and jockeying for the summer season or development, it's all for the big prime time of the summer season here in this, coastal community, and that's the summer months. Another thing that happens seemingly every year is large construction projects or roadwork projects right before or during the early rush of the summer season. And obviously, most of that has to do with state highway and when the funds get allotted. But there was a couple things that I was reading about in your paper that jumped out at me, that I wonder if you think could be news stories or developing stories that you and I will be talking about later, when proprietors of restaurants and tourists are going to be angry. Particularly Route 54, there's going to be quite a bit of road work happening, and then there's going to be some beach work being done in Little Fenwick Island, just north of Ocean City. Do you see that being any sort of a headache and a developing story for tourists and business owners?
I see both of those being very big stories this summer. I mean, doing beach replenishment in town of Fenwick Island during the summer months. I mean, it's just disaster, really. I mean, it's just a nightmare scenario. I mean, that's a small little beach town. If they have to block off, parcels of street ends to have this done. I mean, I actually think it's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, this is just really poor planning. Schedules get changed, but you can't do this. The Fenwick Island, you can't do it. I mean, it's just unheard of. And the mayor to kind of like talk about nonchalantly, like we're going to be seeing beach replenishment in the summer. Well, how about we speak up and maybe we don't let this happen? How about those beachfront property owners? I mean, it's crazy to me that even think that has to be accepted as reality. And then the Route 54 one. Del Dot says that is not going to result in any traffic problems. You can't even say it without laughing. I mean, right. It's going to. I mean, Route 54 is a very difficult road to navigate. I mean, most locals try to avoid it at all costs because it's tight. It's always congested. It's a growing area. There's most areas it's just 2 lanes in and out. So this bridge work that they're talking about is right by Harpoon Hand. It's a small little span, but I mean, it's bridge work, so they know it's not going to be nothing, but it's serious enough that they are considering biting it off in the summertime. It's going to be a nightmare. I hate to say it, but I just, I don't think anybody trusts the spokespeople when they say it's not going to be. It's going to cause a lot of problems for people up there, and I definitely think it'll be. We'll have stories on it. There'll be people coming to local government meetings, lashing out at their local elected officials, and local elected officials will say it's not us, it's DelDOT, and that's going to be hate to be jaded, but I think that's the cycle that we're going to see.
Yeah. Steve Green is the publisher and editor of the Maryland Coast Dispatch. Steve, always good to talk to you. Thanks for being here on Delmarva Today.
Thank you.
You're listening to Delmarva Today on WESM 91.3 and WSDL 90.7. I'm Bryan Russo. Thanks for listening.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.